I'm Carole Taylor. On this edition of Journal, we try to untangle the ever more confusing issues surrounding Aboriginal title in British Columbia and what it means for private property owners. My head's spinning with all of the contradictory information that's out there. Private property's not affected, says our Premier. Oh, maybe it is, says the judge. One pattern is emerging. Decisions are being made by governments in negotiations with First Nations in private, then grandly announced as a fait accompli to the broader public, businesses, and property owners. That's no way to build support or buy-in. To wit, the proposed-then-withdrawn Land Act, giving First Nations a 50% say on all of the province's crown land. The Haida title agreement, the dispute on the Sunshine Coast, the Cowichan court case, and then the federal signing of a deal with the Musqueam claiming vast sections of Metro Vancouver and surrounding municipalities as their hereditary land. It's a fact that when you lose trust, you lose trust. So now when any of these players say, oh, trust me, we won't touch private property, it's a hard sell, especially since the judge in the Cowichan case said her decision may give rise to some uncertainty for private property owners. Indeed. A final irony is that some of the agreements are now being challenged by other First Nations. The Musqueam and Tawassum First Nations are appealing the Cowichan decision. Squamish First Nation said it wasn't consulted on the Musqueam decision. And even the Cowichan First Nation is appealing its own successful court case because they were only awarded half of what they asked for. Thomas Isaac, one of Canada's top lawyers in the field of Aboriginal law, joins us to say what worries him about BC's situation. Back in a moment. As I mentioned, we're kind of getting overwhelmed with all of these recent First Nations deals, title deals, agreements. And so I've asked Thomas Isaac if he would join us again to let's look at this latest one, Musqueam, because it was a little unusual. It wasn't the regular, the province has been negotiating quietly. It's all of a sudden the federal government comes into our province and makes this announcement that they've made with the Musqueam for a big portion of the lower mainland. And the premier sitting there says, I don't know what's in it. Like, didn't this strike you as bizarre?
Yeah, it is bizarre. And Carole, if I may, he not only said he didn't know what's in it, he's okay with it. He's okay with the federal government. I've never heard of such a thing of any premier ever saying that they would be okay with the federal government coming into their province and acknowledging that there may be unextinguished Aboriginal title on provincial land. That's before we get to private property and everything else. So bizarre is not an overstatement. I don't think there's enough adjectives that I could use. And there's a few choice ones I have about all of this, but it's bizarre. I've never seen anything like it.
So tell me what you think about the Musqueam agreement.
Well, look, the federal minister is saying, well, this is a stepping stone for discussion. Well, there's a lot of things you can do to sit down and have a discussion without acknowledging that a First Nation has unextinguished Aboriginal title, which is the exclusive right to land, over basically most of the lower mainland, or within that territory. So what it doesn't do is identify where. What a lot of people seem to be missing is it's the additional uncertainty, Carole, that's what the kicker is here. And we've had a government come in and do that. And so I think it's surprising to hear the federal minister say that she needs an agreement like this to sit down and have a chat. And I think particularly given, as you were saying, like listing through all the things that, the province has been faced with lately, to do it at this moment in time the only way to accept it is that it's deliberately provocative. The minister also, if I may, said that private property was protected in the agreement. I believe the Musqueam have said the same thing, and it's simply not accurate. It's just not true. There isn't a word, there isn't a comma in the agreement that excludes private lands. And if you wanted to exclude, so if in fact you were seeking to provide additional certainty, which the minister also referred to, you would put at least a sentence in to say, oh, and by the way, people's private property is not included within this area. And they chose not to do any such thing.
And so that's one of the things that troubles me. It seems as if by omission, therefore you're safe. But legally, that's not true.
Well, no. And I don't think you need to be a lawyer to figure this out. If I tell you you're covered, and then you read the agreement, go, well, my land's in that area, and there's no exclusion, my words are meaningless. And so this is the problem that we've got. And to do it in February of 2026, given the body blow after body blow the market has taken in this province, and by the market, I mean our economy has taken, in terms of whether BC is a stable, predictable, certain economy within which to invest. I mean, it's negligent is one word that comes to mind.
And so I haven't seen any particular response to the Prime Minister saying this is inappropriate or we don't agree or let's start over again or anything. Have you?
No, and I mean, this is the outstanding question I have in my own mind. Look, I've been a big fan of what he's trying to do internationally at a high level, of getting out there, trying to sell Canada. I was just on an international trip trying to sell our country on attracting Asian investment into Canada. And so I think he's doing the right things. Do they realize that what they've done with this agreement is the exact opposite? That this does nothing to increase predictability and certainty in BC. And, again, we hear these words from the minister about certainty, and it's not true. And it's not true just in law. It's not true in fact. It's like the Premier saying that about the Haida agreement. The Premier's on the record saying that there's more certainty on Haida today than there was 2 years ago. That's not true. That's not true in fact or in law. Anybody that owns property in Haida knows that's not true. And legally, I don't know what the Haida agreement is.
And so people are talking now in communities, especially after Cowichan came forward, now Musqueam. And so they're talking to their neighbors. Everybody's talking about this, but it just seems to be quietly going away. What's going on?
It's very Canadian, isn't it? We'll just let it slip slowly into the bath. And I think, what's the old analogy about putting a frog into boiling water? You just turn up the heat very slowly. And look, it might be overnight. There might be a big catastrophic event. Maybe a credit agency will decide that it needs to do something. I hope not, by the way. I truly hope not, but nothing would be surprising. Maybe the big banks decide that they've had enough of what now the federal and provincial governments are doing to our economy. But from a long-term perspective, this does not end well. There is no scenario where I see this ending well based on the current trajectory we're on. You might ask me, what's that look like? I don't know, Carole. I'm sorry to preempt your next question maybe, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know how this ends. I just know it doesn't end well. You can't sustain a society or economy with secret deals, certainly not in a democracy, with secret deals and body blow after body blow on predictability and certainty in our economy. How much more do they think we can take?
And you're bringing in the point about international travel and deals and trying to bring businesses here. This does not support bringing businesses to British Columbia.
No. And what it is, I mean, I don't know if they don't understand it. I get the sense nobody seems to care in the government. I think it's more of that. But this isn't just about the law. So somebody was saying to me, well, what if Cowichan gets overturned? Look, that'll be good, and we can talk about the law, but that's just one small problem out of many problems. The bigger problem we have is we have an unstable political and public policy environment and economic environment in British Columbia. That is actually the macro issue here. As opposed to, Cowichan decision, UNDRIP, they all feed on a much bigger issue of, I don't know what tomorrow will bring. I don't know what the rest of today will bring. Will there be another announcement out of Victoria or Ottawa? Another body blow? So the minute you get into that environment, which I don't think we've ever really faced in this country, at least in recent history that I know, all bets are off. You certainly know that from your previous roles in government, that the markets can be fickle. The markets can be very certain, and they can also be fickle. And the minute you start losing that confidence that you know what tomorrow may reasonably bring, that's when we hit into trouble. And I think we're there. I think we are there now. I don't think we have to wait much longer, unfortunately.
Actually, we're waiting for the ratings agencies after the last pretty negative budget. And it'll be interesting to look at their forward comments to see if they start to mention this uncertainty on title and property rights.
I think you're right. I'm certainly hearing it privately from some of those types, I would say, in terms of major lenders in our economy and the credit agencies of raising some real concerns. And again, it's about the unpredictability. So we could talk about the law, we could talk about DRIPA, all of these are problematic, but I don't know if most people understand the bigger issue and how the economy runs is based on trust and predictability. And look, there's always risk, but is it measurable and is it reasonable?
We'll continue this discussion right after we take a short break. One thing that is really becoming obvious is the overlapping claims. And Cowichan shows us a bit of that, but when you talk about Musqueam and half the lower mainland, there's going to be conflicting claims. How does that get resolved? You can't say, oh, let's just sit and have a chat and we'll work it out.
Well, given that we have probably 180 of our 200 plus First Nations with outstanding claims, and many of them, not every last one, but many of them in overlap, and in some cases significant overlap. I've mentioned this before to you, Carole, we need to have a game plan. And people sort of dismiss that and go, well, what do you mean by that? Well, it's going into it with core principles that we are going to have a governable province at the end of the day. We are going to have a robust economy. We're going to have a public government. We're going to have a sound and reasonable tax base to support public services, which includes...
Is this your pipe dream?
This is my pipe dream, that we would end up with an economy at the end of the day that can support public services. If you start there, then you go, okay, now we have to settle these overlaps. And the idea of giving all the land back, like, folks, that means there's no British Columbia at the end of the day. So is that what we really mean? And do we need an economy at the end of the day? I believe that's a rhetorical question, right? It has to be. And so it doesn't mean that this is a free-for-all. It doesn't mean that you come in and say a particular First Nation has unextinguished title and you draw on the map most of the lower mainland, the second or third largest economic zone in our country. That does absolutely nothing to promote reconciliation. It does absolutely nothing to promote economic stability or growth. And it certainly leaves behind a lot of First Nations, because do you think every First Nation is going to be able to get that promise from the government? Of course not. So we're back to what I think I coined with you before, first past the post reconciliation, which is not reconciliation.
So with Cowichan, it's now going to be in the courts because the two First Nations are appealing this decision. Is the court going to be the one drawing the line?
Look, the courts are going to play an important role, and they have played an important role in terms of laying out the legal groundwork. But I think what people need to understand is look, we can win the Cowichan decision. The Cowichan decision come out and draw very clear lines around borders, and it's not the big issue. I mean, it's an important issue, and if you're on the 800 acres right now, it's probably the most important thing in your life, so I don't want to downplay it. But the bigger issue is the lack of public government leadership on this issue, Carole. I know I'm a broken record. I think every interview with you I've said it, but you can track all of this. Look, UNDRIP. In the Musqueam agreement, the federal government said UNDRIP is now the minimum standard for protecting Indigenous people. It's a ridiculous proposition. It's a ridiculous proposition. It's not true. They can't live up to that commitment. So then you go, well, why are we saying it? So yes, Cowichan, look, it'll work its way through the courts. We'll ultimately get a legal decision that hopefully will give us some degree of certainty on indefeasible title. But that does not solve the BC issue. The BC issue is the government of BC and now the federal government. That is the BC issue. And it's been that way for decades.
So legally, if you're doing one of these agreements, if you put the words in that private property title holders are exempt from whatever agreement we're making, does that have standing?
Yeah, absolutely. From a contractual point of view. Now, can you limit a constitutional right? Outside of treaty, I say no. Because remember, treaties constitute, so if you've got a constitutional right, it's here. Legislation and contracts are here, everyone. So in order to fetter or limit the constitutional right, it has to be at the same level. The only mechanism we have is by way of treaty. So all these agreements that you hear governments of all political stripes going on about, oh, this provides certain, no, they don't. No, they don't.
And so
they just don't.
It wouldn't even be enough to have that line saying private property is exempt.
No, I mean, it would be something that would show some degree of leadership from a public government that's at least willing to, push back on a contract and have something in there. But no, fundamentally, it can't fetter the constitutional right. What can fetter a constitutional right to title is justifiable infringement, the phrase that the government of BC doesn't like to use in any of its agreements. I would have liked to have seen it in the Haida agreement. Why? I could then write an opinion on the Haida agreement and say, hey, I may not be happy with the agreement, but at least I know where it fits in the existing legal framework. They refused to use that. They refused to justify the oil and gas sector based on justifiable infringement. They, being the government of BC, refused to justify about 15% of our GDP in the Yehi or Blueberry River case. You can't make this up. And so if they're willing to do that, they're willing to do just about anything. And I will remind you, Carole, and your viewers, we still don't have an order yet from Cowichan. I keep calling on the provincial government. I think we were told that somebody's going to the wall to protect private property rights. We don't have an order, so we're not into the appeal process formally yet in front of the BC Court of Appeal. As far as I know, we don't have an order. Two, the Premier immediately turned around and said, Musqueam's a great agreement. Thank you, federal government, for unilaterally coming into BC and declaring that there's unextinguished Aboriginal title on provincial land, which again is unprecedented in my rather short history on this earth. I've never heard of such a thing, of any premier of any political stripe welcoming a foreign government, a federal government, to acknowledge title on what is constitutionally the provinces. So that's the evidence.
You mentioned UNDRIP in passing, and as I recall, when the mineral case came down and the judge said, well, you have written laws that say you must follow UNDRIP or DRIPA, and the Premier was enraged and said, it's not for the court to decide. He said, I'm going to rewrite a line or two in DRIPA. Have you heard anything more about that?
Well, there was some stuff reported in the media that the First Nations apparently have seen the draft. By the way, this is before the House has seen it, I might add. Now, the political scientists out there can correct me. Carole, you've served in government. You may correct me. I thought the House was supposed to see legislative amendments first, but I guess I'm old school. That's all I know. It will take more than just a few lines. What the Court of Appeal did is that they read English. And if you look, any of your viewers, you don't have to be a lawyer. Yes, it says must. You don't need to be a lawyer. Type into Google, everyone, BC Interpretation Act, S.8, round bracket 1. You'll see the clause pop up. Read it for yourself. It's there in plain English that every enactment in British Columbia, that's every statute, every regulation, must be construed as being consistent with UNDRIP. That's what then Attorney General Eby put into the legislation, and all the Court of Appeal said they're not an activist court. They're not confused, according to Eby, that they were confused. They read English.
How is this affecting your life? Are you losing sleep?
Well, I would say with the Musqueam agreement, it's just really disturbing. I mean, it's just body blow after, like, I like living in British Columbia, or I've liked living in British Columbia, but, you know, it's, this isn't going to end well, Carole. I think we all know that. The bridge is out. You can't keep running a province this way without paying a very serious price. We're still making empty promises to First. So I can flip the hat around very quickly. So I'm talking about the economy and all that. Well, let's talk about the empty promises to Indigenous peoples. You know, UNDRIP's now the minimum standard. False. Can't be met. The Premier's words in the Interpretation Act, false. Can't be done. You can't govern any province. So at what point do we stop the empty promises too? My view now is I think platitudes ought to be illegal in Canada. I think our governments have gone so over the line with platitudes, just warm, fuzzy blankets of anything that works, and we are all left, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to pick up the pieces at some point.
Thank you, Thomas. I'm not sure I'm going to get any sleep tonight, but I appreciate all of your comments on this. Back in a minute. Sadly, all these cases and the growing uncertainty over what it means to the average property owner in BC is having an effect, and it's not a good one. An Angus Reid poll showed 60% of respondents think the Cowichan court case harms the relationship between Indigenous groups and the rest of the province. Let me know your thoughts on YouTube. Till next time, I'm Carole Taylor.